Hello there and welcome to my review of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the 6th James Bond film and the first not to star Sean Connery. In this particular outing, Bond saves the life of a woman named Tracy, and her father kind of takes a bit of a shine to Bond really and thinks that Bond is the answer to her problems because she's kind of going off the rails. So he strikes up a deal with Bond that in return for giving him the location of Blofeld's whereabouts, or at least a clue to Blofeld's whereabouts, Bond will marry Tracy. However, Tracy learns of this deal and kind of forces her father to just give him the location of Blofeld without the marriage ceremony, basically. It's really a clever move on her part, actually, because when Bond does make a move on her and eventually, at the end of the film, does actually marry her, she knows that it's not because of any deal he's struck with her father, but because he actually loves her. So Bond is given the whereabouts of Blofeld and he tracks him down in the Swiss Alps to this mountaintop hideaway where Blofeld is conducting these experiments. Bond disguises himself as a man called Sir Hilary, who's a genealogist that Blofeld has asked to come out and basically trace his family tree or prove that he actually belongs to this particular dynasty. It's a bit of a convoluted way essentially of getting Bond there. Well, that's the plot, but what about the film? First thing I've got to say is George Lazenby is no Sean Connery. He doesn't quite have the punch, the kick to this role that Sean Connery brings, the kind of sardonic wit. He's not good with the one-liners. Every time he delivers a one-liner, it goes down like a lead weight, really. But what he does have is the physicality. Whenever there's a fight scene in this film or an action sequence, I really do buy George Lazenby in this role. He holds himself well, he acquits himself well, and there's something very towering about him. He has a very giant physical presence. Like I say, particularly in the fight scenes, you feel the impact from his hits, and I really do buy him as a physical threat. The first time I watched this film was earlier last year. I'd heard an awful lot about it. I heard that from some quarters this is one of the worst Bonds, particularly because of Lazenby, even though I think that's kind of unfair. He only got one opportunity to prove himself. I would have liked to have seen him do another one. But from some camps, this is actually considered one of the best Bonds as well. And I really think that's down to the plot, down to the story. I really like the relationship that they build between Bond and Tracy. And Tracy is quite literally the strongest female presence we have had up to this point in a Bond film. She's the best Bond girl up to this point. She basically kicks ass. She gets into situations with Bond where she doesn't become the damsel in distress. There are several times in this film when she really takes the lead, and it's actually her who's getting Bond to safety. There's a real good car chase in this film. The best of the series up to this point, actually. Again, there's many moments in this film that I have to highlight as the best in the series so far up to this point. There's a couple of fight sequences. One in a hotel apartment. Bond goes looking for Tracy. She's invited him there, and instead she comes across this goon. We later learn it's one of Draco's men who's just protecting Tracy, really, because he doesn't know who Bond is, and they get into a tussle, and it's a really good fight sequence. A lot of people don't like this style of editing. The director Peter Hunt started out as an editor on the Bond franchise, but you really see that here. You can see how he's thinking as an editor, and the fight sequences in this are very choppy. A lot of people don't like them, but for me, I like it here, this particular style of editing, because of the camera angles. Like if you look at a movie like Taken 3, Olivia Megaton can't direct an action scene to save his life. He gets in too close. He uses the choppy editing and he gets in too close, so you can't see a thing that's going on. Now Peter Hunt uses that choppy editing style here, but he doesn't get in too close. It's a mixture of mid shots and wide shots, so you can always see what's going on. I really like Draco, Tracy's father. As I said, he's a really lovable rogue. He is a villain, but on the other hand, he's also quite heroic in many ways. He comes to the rescue at the end of the film when Bond feels he's kind of been deserted by his MI6 family, so to speak. I don't think any of the actors who have ever portrayed Blofeld throughout the Bond franchise have ever given what I would consider a definitive portrayal of the villain. But compared to Donald Pleasance, I think Telly Savalas has a lot more power. He has a lot more malevolence about him. He doesn't just come off as this like creepy loner kind of sitting in the corner somewhere. I buy his ego in this film, so it is a step up from Pleasance, but still I kind of feel like another actor could do something more with this role. Even some of the usual supporting players in this film, like M and Moneypenny, get a little bit more to do here than we've seen in the past. There's a few scenes with them where a bit more of their character comes out. We get a scene with Moneypenny where she kind of interferes in a particular situation with Bond and M, and kind of, in a way, plays them off each other, and shows that she's intelligent, that she's not just kind of fawning over Bond in some behind some desk somewhere, but that she does actually have a brain. She is actually able to manipulate situations. M2, we get to see him doing a little bit of a hobby in this thing with butterflies, and some nice kind of comedy moments, or just character moments between him and Bond. I like the dialogue in the scenes between them, and they kind of stand out in a way that they never have previously. It's always been more the case that Bond comes into the room, M gives him a mission and sends him on his way. But in this film, the few scenes they get, there just seems to be more meat to them. We feel like M is a bit more of a character in this, as opposed to just a cipher for Bond to go off on a mission. The character we don't get as much of as we usually do in the Bond franchise is Q, and I'm actually happy with that, which a lot of people may find quite surprising. They may hate me for saying it, but I've never really liked Q as a character. So that's the positives, but what about the negatives? Well, the most glaringly obvious one for me is the first meeting between Bond and Blofeld. Why do these guys not recognise each other? They met in You Only Live Twice. They should be able to recognise each other. It's not like they're wearing the most elaborate disguises. And one of the theories is that this is a prequel to You Only Live Twice, but that doesn't make sense either, because the dialogue between Blofeld and Bond in You Only Live Twice wouldn't really sit with that. The way that they talk to each other, the way that they introduce themselves to each other, isn't really fitting of two men who have already met in the past. So it doesn't make sense. The only other theory there would be that James Bond itself is actually a code name for an agent, and that this isn't the same man. But again, I don't really buy that. It doesn't really play into aspects of the film. Like, we see Bond taking possessions out of his drawer in his office, and they're throwbacks to previous films like Honey Rider's dagger and the watch that was used in From Russia with Love. So again, that wouldn't make sense either. We have to believe that this is the same man. Blofeld's plot in this film is also quite weak. His plan to disperse this virus, and the way that he's developed it, for me, is quite strong. I like that element of the plot, but the use of the women to disperse this virus is complete hogwash to me. As we've seen in past movies, he has armies of people at his disposal. I don't see why he would need to brainwash these women in order to send them out to release this virus. It's really just an excuse to get a bevy of beautiful women in this one location that Bond can then seduce. I also think that they spend far too much time in this location. Again, this primarily because they have to have all these interactions between Bond and these women, and that whole element of the film doesn't quite play as well for me, just because of the relationship that they're building up between Bond and Tracy. We're supposed to believe that Bond is actually going to kind of put his old ways behind him, because he's going to settle down with this woman. So when you throw all these women into the mix that Bond then has to seduce, it cheapens what comes later between Bond and Tracy. Some of the ski chase sequences as well, and the bobsleigh sequence between Bond and Blofeld towards the end of the film. While they do get the blood pumping because they're quite fast, very kinetic, there's some good moments in them. I do feel that they are let down by some really bad rear projection. When we get close-ups of Bond, we can tell it's not him skiing, so it does a bit of a disservice to the other stuff around it, the really great stun work that's going on, and the wide shots that we're seeing there. And finally, of course, is the whole idea that we're supposed to buy that after Blofeld is seemingly hung on a tree, Bond just walks away. He just leaves him. That's what we're supposed to believe, because there's no other explanation for the fact that Blofeld returns at the end and kills Tracy. And for me, it's just because of how such a big a villain Blofeld is, the lengths that Bond has gone to over the course of these films to track him down. I don't buy for a minute that he would just assume that Blofeld is dead and walk away and not bring back the body. He would retrieve that body. I have absolutely no question about that. He would retrieve that body and bring it back to the officials, to some government officials. He would at the very least check that he is dead. So when Blofeld does return at the end, I don't quite buy that aspect of it. However, it does leave us on a real downbeat ending, which is a positive for this film, it's a positive for this franchise, and it's a positive for movies of this kind in general, because we just don't get this kind of ending. Bond's wife, Tracy, is just killed, and that's it. We're left at the end of this film with Bond kind of crying over her dead body, and it's really ballsy. So despite all those negatives, of which there were quite a few, I still have to highly rate this. The positives really do outweigh the negatives. This is one of my favourite Bond films. Other than Dr. No, which is my favourite Connery Bond, there hasn't been a Bond film in this franchise up to this point that can really give this film a run for its money. So this film is like I say, it's a real nice surprise for me, and I give it a 7.5 out of 10. So what do you think of On Her Majesty's Secret Service? Are you glad that George Lazenby only got one chance to do it? Do you wish he'd never got a chance to do it? Or would you like to have seen him do more in the franchise? Comment below and let me know. And until next time, thanks for watching. Hello there, and welcome to my review of the 6th James Bond film and the first not to star James Connery. Who the hell's James Connery?